Zixthron stood at the viewing window of Nexus Station 7, watching the cargo ships drift past like slow, tired animals. His forearms hung loose at his sides. His yellow eyes showed no emotion, but inside, he felt something close to despair. 3 ships. He had lost 3 ships in 2 months. The Vreknar raiders had taken everything. Cargo worth millions of credits, gone. Crew members, dead or missing. His insurance company had sent him a very polite message explaining that they would no longer cover his convoys through the Kepler corridor. The message ended with wishes for his future success in other business ventures. Other business ventures. As if he could simply start over. As if 20 years of building his shipping company meant nothing. The door behind him slid open. Drevik walked in, his blue scales catching the station lights. He was Zixthron's oldest friend and business partner. They had started this company together when they were young and foolish and full of dreams. "The Felisari crew is refusing to fly," Drevik said. His voice was flat. "All of them. They say the Kepler corridor is a death sentence." Zixthron did not turn from the window. "They are probably right. So what do? We cannot run the route without crew. We cannot afford to hire drone ships. The route is our only advantage over the bigger companies." Drevik moved to stand beside his friend. "Perhaps it is time to admit defeat." "Perhaps," Zixthron said quietly. They stood in silence for a long moment. Outside, a passenger liner moved past, its lights bright and cheerful. Somewhere on that ship, beings were laughing and drinking and not worrying about Vreknar raiders. Zixthron felt very old. "I need a drink," he said finally. The station bar was called The Last Stop. It was not a creative name, but it was accurate. Beings from dozens of species crowded the tables and the long metal counter. The noise was loud and constant. Zixthron found a small table in the corner and ordered something strong. Drevik had not come with him. His partner needed time alone, and so did Zixthron. But being alone in a crowd was different from being alone in an empty office. Here, he could pretend he was just another traveler, not a man watching his life's work collapse. He was on his second drink when the trouble started. A group of Vreknar had entered the bar. There were 3 of them, tall and broad, their gray skin marked with ritual scars. The Vreknar were a violent species. Everyone knew this. They took what they wanted, and they hurt anyone who complained. These 3 were bothering a small merchant at the bar. He was a Talari, a species known for their gentle nature and complete inability to fight. The Vreknar were laughing as they pushed him, knocked his drink from his hand, made crude jokes about his family. Zixthron looked away. It was not his business. Station security would come eventually. There was nothing he could do. Then the humans arrived. He had heard of humans, of course. Everyone had. They were a new species, only recently arrived on the galactic stage. The stories about them were strange and contradictory. Some said they were brilliant inventors. Others said they were violent savages. Most species agreed on one thing. Humans were unpredictable and possibly insane. These 2 humans did not look insane. The male was average height, with dark hair and tired eyes. The female was shorter, with red hair pulled back in a simple style. They were both wearing the practical clothing of station workers. They walked up to the Vreknar without fear. "Hey," the male said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "Leave the little guy alone." The largest Vreknar turned slowly. He was almost twice the human size. His scarred face twisted into an expression of disbelief. "What did you say to me?" "I said, leave him alone. He hasn't done anything to you." The bar had gone quiet. Every being in the room was watching. Zixthron felt his heart beating faster. This human was going to die. The Vreknar would tear him apart. But the human did not seem worried. He stood with his feet slightly apart, his hands relaxed at his sides. The female moved to his left, creating distance between herself and her companion. They moved like they had done this before. The Vreknar laughed. It was an ugly sound. Little human thinks he is brave. I will show you what bravery gets you on this station. He reached for the human. What happened next was so fast that Zixtron almost missed it. The human moved under the Vreknar's arm, struck him twice in the throat, and stepped back. The big alien made a choking sound and stumbled. Before his companions could react, the female had produced a small weapon from somewhere and was pointing it at them. "Your friend will be fine in a minute," she said. "He will have trouble talking for a few days, but he will live. The question is whether you want to join him on the floor or walk away." The Vreknar stared at her. They stared at their choking companion. They stared at the male human who had not even broken a sweat. They walked away. The bar erupted in whispers. Zixtron sat frozen in his chair, his drink forgotten. He had just watched a single human defeat a Vreknar warrior in seconds. Not with weapons, not with tricks, with his bare hands. The humans helped the Talari merchant to his feet and made sure he was unharmed. Then they walked to the bar and ordered drinks, as casual as if nothing had happened. Zixtran found himself standing. He found himself walking toward them. His mind was racing with possibilities. "Excuse me," he said. "May I speak with you?" The male turned. Up close, he looked ordinary. Brown eyes, a few scars, a face that would disappear in any crowd. "Sure. What do you need?" "I need protection for my cargo convoy, through the Kepler corridor. The Vreknar have been raiding my ships, and He paused, gathering his courage. "I need warriors who do not fear them." The humans exchanged a glance. The male smiled slightly. "I'm Danny. This is Katie. We run a small security operation. The Kepler corridor is dangerous." "I know. The Vreknar there aren't like these station thugs. They're organized, well-armed." "I know." Danny studied him for a long moment. "It'll cost you. We have a team of 5. We don't come cheap." Zixtron thought of his lost ships, his ruined company, his terrified crew. "Name your price." Danny named it. It was high. Very high. "I agree," Zixtron said without hesitation. They shook hands, a human custom that Zixtron had learned about but never practiced. Danny's grip was firm and steady. When Zixtron returned to his office and told Drevik what he had done, his partner stared at him as if he had grown a second head. "You actually hired humans?" Drevik's voice rose with each word. "That's madness. Absolute madness." "Perhaps," Zixtron said calmly, "but I have tried everything else. Maybe madness is exactly what we need." The convoy would depart in 3 days. Danny and his team would arrive tomorrow. For the first time in months, Zixtron felt something that might have been hope. It might also have been fear. With humans, he suspected, the two were often the same thing. The humans arrived on the morning of the 2nd day. There were 5 of them, and they came aboard the Starlight Wanderer, carrying heavy bags and wearing easy smiles. Yalara watched them from the upper deck. She was the first mate, a position of honor among the Felisari. Her people were small and covered in soft fur. They had large eyes, designed for seeing in low light, and delicate hands meant for careful work. They were not fighters. They had never been fighters. The idea of violence made her stomach turn. And now there were humans on her ship. She had heard the stories. Everyone had heard the stories. Humans were predators. They had evolved on a planet so dangerous that most species would not survive there for a single day. They ate the flesh of other animals. They fought wars for entertainment. They lived short, violent lives and seemed to enjoy every moment of it. Danny was the first up the ramp. He nodded politely to the Felisari crew members who scattered out of his way. Behind him came Katie, her red hair bright in the ship's artificial lighting. Then came 3 others. Chris was the largest. He stood almost 2 meters tall and was built like a cargo loader. His arms were thick with muscle, and his face carried scars that spoke of many battles. When he smiled at a passing crew member, the poor Felisari nearly fainted. Megan was smaller, with kind eyes and brown hair tied back. She carried medical equipment and moved with the careful grace of a healer. Of all the humans, she seemed the least threatening. But Yalara had learned that appearances meant nothing with this species. Tony was the strangest. He was thin and energetic, constantly looking around at everything with intense curiosity. Within minutes of boarding, he had asked 17 questions about the ship's engine systems. The chief engineer had hidden in his quarters and refused to come out. Zixthron greeted them personally. Yalara watched her captain shake hands with each human, his forearms stiff with formal politeness. She could see the uncertainty in his movements. He had hired these creatures, but he did not know what to expect from them. Neither did anyone else. The first 3 days of the journey were quiet. The convoy moved through safe space, heading toward the dangerous Kepler corridor. The Felisari crew did their jobs and avoided the humans whenever possible. But avoidance was difficult on a ship. Yalara found herself watching them constantly. She told herself it was her duty as first mate to observe potential threats. That was not entirely a lie. But she was also curious, despite her fear. The humans were strange. There was no other word for it. They communicated in ways that made no sense. Danny would say something insulting to Chris, and Chris would laugh and insult him back. They called this joking. Among Felisari, such words would start blood feuds lasting generations. Among humans, it seemed to be a sign of friendship. They slept far less than any reasonable species. Yalara required 12 hours of rest each day. The humans functioned on 5 or 6, sometimes less. They would stay awake through the night, talking and playing games with small paper cards. When Yalara asked Katie about this, the human had shrugged and said, "We'll sleep when we're dead." The statement haunted Yalara for days. They consumed a black liquid called coffee that contained a stimulant poison. Yalara had scanned it with medical equipment. The results terrified her. A single cup contained enough chemicals to kill a Felisari. The humans drank multiple cups each day and complained it was not strong enough. But the most disturbing thing was their attitude toward the coming danger. The Vreknar were waiting in the Kepler corridor. Everyone knew this. The convoy was sailing into almost certain combat. The Felisari crew moved through the ship with heavy steps and sad eyes, preparing themselves for possible death. The humans seemed excited. Tony spent his time modifying the ship's weapons. He had not asked permission. He had simply appeared in the weapons bay one morning and begun taking things apart. When Zixthron confronted him, Tony had demonstrated his improvements. The point defense batteries now tracked 3 times faster and hit twice as hard. No one complained after that. Katie reviewed the convoy's operations with frightening efficiency. She found 12 ways they were wasting fuel, 8 ways they were losing money, and 3 ways their communication systems could be hacked by enemies. She fixed all of these problems in 2 days. Danny studied the Vreknar. He read every report, watched every recording of their attacks, analyzed their tactics until he knew them better than their own commanders. In the evenings, he would share his findings with his team, speaking calmly about violence as if discussing the weather. Chris maintained the team's weapons. He had many weapons. Some of them Yalara could not even identify. He cleaned them and checked them and arranged them with loving care. When she asked him if he was worried about the coming battle, he had smiled. The smile was worse than any threat. Worried? No. This is what I do. The Vreknar think they're the scariest thing in this corridor. They're wrong. Megan was the one who finally bridged the gap between the crew and the humans. A young Felisari engineer named Trill had fallen ill with a common but painful condition. The The ship's medical supplies were limited. He was suffering badly. Megan appeared in the medical bay without being asked. She examined Trill with gentle hands and soft words. She mixed a treatment from her own supplies, something she called field medicine. Within an hour, Trill was sleeping peacefully. Word spread through the ship. The human healer had helped one of their own. She had not asked for payment or recognition. She had simply seen someone in pain and fixed it. That night, 2 Felisari crew members joined the humans for their card game. They did not know the rules. They lost badly. But they laughed, and the humans laughed with them, and something in the ship's atmosphere changed. Yalara wrote in her personal log that evening. She described the humans in careful detail, trying to make sense of what she observed. They are not what I expected. They are violent, yes. They speak of battle with disturbing comfort. But they also help without being asked. They make jokes in the face of danger. They protect those weaker than themselves. I do not understand them. I am not sure I will ever understand them. But I am beginning to think that perhaps being allied with them is not the worst fate. Tomorrow we enter the Kepler corridor. The Vreknar are waiting. The humans say they are ready. I believe them, and that frightens me more than anything else. The next morning, long-range sensors detected Vreknar scout ships tracking the convoy. They were not hiding. They wanted to be seen. They wanted the convoy to know death was coming. Danny gathered his team in the cargo bay. The Felisari crew watched from the upper decks, unable to look away. "They'll hit us tomorrow," Danny said. His voice was casual, almost bored. "Standard raiding formation, probably 6 ships. When they come, I want the crew locked down in safe areas. We'll handle the rest." Katie nodded. Chris cracked his knuckles. Tony grinned like a child given a new toy. Megan checked her medical kit one final time. "Any questions?" Danny asked. There were none. "Good. Get some sleep, everyone. Tomorrow's going to be fun." The Felisari crew stared at each other in disbelief. Fun. The human had called potential death fun. Yalara retreated to her quarters and did not sleep. Outside her window the stars drifted past, cold and uncaring. Somewhere ahead, the Vreknar were preparing to kill them all. And the humans were looking forward to it. Madness. Complete madness. But as the night wore on, Yalara realized something strange. She was no longer afraid of dying. She was too busy being curious about what the humans would do. Perhaps that was its own kind of madness. Perhaps it was contagious. Tomorrow, she would find out. The attack came at dawn. Yalara was on the bridge when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed across every surface. Crew members ran to their stations with wide, terrified eyes. On the main screen, 6 Vreknar raider ships emerged from behind an asteroid cluster, like predators rising from dark water. 6 ships, against 3 cargo vessels and 1 escort. The math was simple and horrible. Zixthron stood at the command console, his 4 hands gripping the rail. His voice was steady, but Yalara could see the fear in his eyes. "All crew to defensive positions. Seal all bulkheads. Prepare for boarding actions." Danny's voice came through the communication system, calm as morning coffee. "Captain, keep your people locked down tight. We've got this." Yalara wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to believe him. But the Vreknar ships were closing fast, and their weapons were already charging. The first barrage hit the convoy like a hammer. The Starlight Wanderer shook violently. Sparks flew from damaged panels. Somewhere deep in the ship, metal screamed against metal. But the point defense systems Tony had modified came alive. Beams of energy lanced out, destroying incoming missiles before they could reach the hull. The firing rate was incredible, far beyond anything the ship should have been capable of. The Vreknar adjusted their tactics. They launched boarding torpedoes, small armored vessels designed to punch through hulls and deliver warriors directly into enemy ships. Dozens of them streaked toward the convoy. The defense systems destroyed most of them. But not all. 3 torpedoes hit the Starlight Wanderer. The impacts threw Ylara from her feet. When she stood, her ears were ringing and blood was running from a cut on her forehead. "Breach in Cargo Bay 7, someone shouted. "They're inside." On the security screens, Ylara watched the Vreknar warriors pour through the breached hull. They were huge, gray-skinned monsters, carrying weapons that could cut through steel. There were at least 8 of them, and they moved with the confidence of experienced killers. They did not know what was waiting for them. Katie and Chris were positioned behind a stack of cargo containers. They had set up a kill zone, a narrow corridor that the Vreknar would have to pass through to reach the rest of the ship. The first Vreknar came around the corner and died before he could fire a shot. Katie's aim was perfect. The alien collapsed, and his companions roared with rage. They charged. Ylara had seen combat footage before. She had studied tactical records. Nothing had prepared her for watching humans fight. Chris stepped out from cover and met the charge head-on. He was smaller than the Vreknar, weaker than the Vreknar, less armored than the Vreknar. None of that mattered. He moved like water, flowing around their attacks, striking at weak points with brutal precision. A Vreknar blade caught him across the shoulder. Blood sprayed across the deck plates. Chris did not slow down. He did not scream. He laughed. He laughed and kept fighting. Katie provided cover fire, her shots forcing the Vreknar to split their attention. The aliens were confused. They had expected terrified prey, not this coordinated resistance. They had expected easy victory, not a blood-covered human grinning at them through broken teeth. In 90 seconds, 6 Vreknar lay dead on the cargo bay floor. The remaining 2 retreated, stumbling over their fallen companions. They made it 3 steps before Megan appeared from a side corridor and shot them both. "Chris, you're bleeding everywhere," she said calmly. "Sit down." "It's fine. Just a scratch." "Sit down." Chris sat. Megan went to work with medical supplies, her hands moving with practiced speed. Ylara watched on the security feed as the human healer repaired damage that would have killed any Felisari. She closed wounds, injected treatments, and wrapped bandages in less than 2 minutes. "There," Megan said. "You're good." Chris stood, rolled his shoulder experimentally, and picked up his weapon. "Thanks. Now where were we?" Ylara felt dizzy. This was not possible. No species could recover from such injuries so quickly. No warrior could take such punishment and continue fighting. But humans were not like other species. Ylara was beginning to understand that. Meanwhile, on the main screen, something even more impossible was happening. Danny and Tony had left the Starlight Wanderer. They had commandeered a small shuttle and launched directly at the lead Vreknar ship. It was a suicide mission. Everyone on the bridge knew it was a suicide mission. The Vreknar knew it too. Their commander probably laughed when he saw the tiny shuttle approaching. 2 humans against an entire warship. What could they possibly accomplish? They accomplished chaos. Danny piloted the shuttle with insane skill, dodging fire that should have destroyed them a dozen times. Tony had modified the shuttle's weapons, just as he had modified everything else. What should have been a harmless transport now hit like a warship. They punched through the Vreknar shields. They crashed into the landing bay. And then, Danny did something that no tactical expert would ever recommend. He went hunting. The Vreknar ship had 300 warriors on board. Danny and Tony killed 14 of them in 6 minutes. They moved through the corridors like ghosts, striking and vanishing, leaving confusion and death behind them. The Vreknar commander tried to organize a response. He gathered his best warriors, he set up ambushes and traps. None of it worked. Danny found him on the command deck, surrounded by guards. The battle lasted 12 seconds. When it was over, the commander was dead, and Danny was broadcasting on all Vreknar frequencies. Your leader is dead. Your boarding parties have failed. You can continue this fight and die, or you can run. Choose. Ylara watched the Vreknar ships hesitate. They were still stronger. They could still overwhelm the convoy with numbers. But their commander was dead, and somewhere on that lead ship, a human was waiting for their answer. The Vreknar chose to run. One by one, the raider ships turned and fled into the darkness between stars. The battle that should have been a massacre had lasted 43 minutes. The convoy that should have been destroyed had lost nothing but cargo containers. On the bridge of the Starlight Wanderer, no one spoke. They were all too shocked to form words. Zixthran slowly sat down in his command chair. His 4 hands were shaking. The shuttle returned 20 minutes later. Danny and Tony walked back onto the ship as casually as if they had gone for a morning stroll. Both were covered in blood, most of it not their own. "Captain," Danny said, nodding politely to Zixthran, "I think we're clear for now, but they'll be back with more next time." Zixthran opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "How?" he finally managed. "How is any of this possible?" Danny shrugged. "We're human. This is what we do." He walked past the stunned captain, heading for the crew quarters. "I'm going to get some sleep. Wake me if anything interesting happens." Interesting. The man had just killed the leader of a Vreknar raiding fleet, and he called it interesting. Ylara wrote in her personal log that night. Her hands were still trembling. "I was wrong about them. I thought they were violent savages who enjoyed killing. That is not quite true. They do not enjoy killing. They enjoy winning. They enjoy protecting those who cannot protect themselves. They enjoy being good at something, even if that something is terrible." The one called Chris was injured badly. He laughed. He laughed and continued fighting. Later, I saw him sitting with the Felisari children who live on board, showing them a game with string. Kind. I do not understand how both things can exist in the same being. I do not understand how someone can kill without hesitation, and then play with children without any sign of disturbance. Perhaps I am not meant to understand. Perhaps I am only meant to be grateful. The Vreknar will return. Danny says so, and I believe him. But for tonight, we are alive. For tonight, we are safe. Because of the humans, because of their madness, I am no longer afraid of them. I think I am starting to admire them. That is perhaps the strangest thing of all. The convoy returned to Nexus Station 7 as heroes. Word had spread faster than light itself. A handful of humans had defeated a Vreknar raiding fleet. They had killed the raider's commander on his own ship. They had done what no one believed possible. When the Starlight Wanderer docked, crowds were waiting. Merchants, travelers, station workers, all pressing against the barriers to catch a glimpse of the legendary humans. Zixthran walked down the boarding ramp like a man in a dream. 2 months ago, he had been a failed businessman waiting for bankruptcy. Now, creatures he had never met were cheering his name. Danny and his team followed behind, looking uncomfortable with the attention. Katie kept her hand near her weapon, watching the crowd for threats. Chris stood at the back, arms crossed, face unreadable. Only Tony seemed to enjoy the welcome, waving cheerfully at anyone who made eye contact. In the days that followed, everything changed. High Merchant Corval, the most powerful figure in the Corvalian trading community, requested a private meeting with Zixthran. He offered a seat on the Merchant Guild Council, the highest honor a trader could receive. The only condition: exclusive access to human security services. Zixthran declined. Danny's team was not for sale. Other merchants came with other offers: protection contracts, escort missions. Even legitimate military organizations reached out, curious about these humans who had humiliated the Vreknar. Danny took some jobs and refused others. He seemed to know exactly which risks were worth taking. But not everyone was celebrating. Warlord Krathvex stood on the command deck of his flagship, staring at a holographic display of the Kepler corridor. His gray skin was marked with more scars than any other Vreknar in the sector. He had earned those scars through 30 years of conquest. He had killed chieftains and crushed rebellions. He had built an empire on fear. And now 5 humans had made him look weak. The report from the failed raid played on repeat in his mind. 14 warriors dead on his own ship. His fleet commander killed in personal combat. The surviving raiders had returned with stories of a human who moved like smoke and struck like lightning. Krathvex's second-in-command stood nearby, waiting for orders. "My lord, should we send another raiding party? A larger one?" "No," Krathvex said slowly. "A raiding party is not enough. This requires a fleet." His second hesitated. "A fleet? For 5 humans and a merchant convoy?" Krathvex turned to face him. His eyes burned with cold fury. "Those 5 humans have done more damage than 100 enemies. Do you know what the other species are saying? They are saying the Vreknar can be beaten. They are saying humans are the new power in the outer sectors." He stepped closer and his second flinched back. "Our empire exists because other species fear us. If that fear dies, everything dies." He turned back to the display. "We will take 40 warships to Nexus Station 7. We will demand the humans be surrendered to us. If the station refuses, we will destroy it. Every being on that station will die, and the galaxy will remember why they should fear the Vreknar." His second bowed low. "It will be done, my lord." Back on Nexus Station 7, the humans had settled into a strange routine. Megan had established a small medical clinic in an unused storage area. She treated anyone who came, regardless of species or ability to pay. Word spread quickly, and soon her waiting room was filled with creatures from across the station. A Corvallian with chronic joint pain. A Felisari child with a persistent cough. Even a Talari merchant who had been injured in a loading accident. Tony spent his days in the station's maintenance areas, helping repair damaged systems and annoying the engineering staff with suggestions for improvements. Most of his suggestions were actually improvements. The engineers had stopped complaining and started taking notes. Chris had become unexpectedly popular with the station's children. Despite his size and his scars, he had a gentle way with young ones. He taught them games from Earth, told them stories about his homeworld, and stood guard outside the station school during recess. Katie worked with Zixthron to reorganize the convoy operations. Her efficiency was remarkable. Within 2 weeks, the Starlight Wanderer was running better than it ever had. Danny spent his time watching, planning, waiting. He knew the Vreknar would return. He knew it would be worse next time. And when the station's long-range sensors detected a fleet of 40 warships entering the system, he was not surprised. The station council convened an emergency session. Representatives from every species filled the Great Hall, their voices rising in panic and argument. "We must surrender the humans," a Corvallian merchant shouted. "This is their fault. If they had not provoked the Vreknar." "The Vreknar were raiding our ships long before the humans arrived," Zixthron interrupted. "They will not stop because we give them what they want. They will only demand more." "Easy for you to say," a Talari delegate snapped. "You are not the one facing destruction." "None of us are facing destruction, if we stand together." The argument continued for hours. Fear made the delegates irrational. Pride made them stubborn. By the time the session neared its end, no decision had been reached. Then Danny walked into the hall. He had not been invited. He did not care. He walked to the center of the room and stood quietly until the shouting died down. "You're afraid," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried. "That's reasonable. The Vreknar have 40 warships out there, and you have a space station with outdated weapons and a population of civilians. From where you're sitting, surrender probably looks like the smart choice. No one spoke. But here's what you're not thinking about, Danny continued. The Vreknar don't want the humans. They want your fear. They've built their entire empire on the idea that no one can stand against them. We proved them wrong. That's what they can't accept. He looked around the room, meeting eyes with delegates from a dozen species. You hand us over, and they'll take us. Then they'll demand something else. Tribute, maybe. Access to your trade routes. A cut of your profits, and you'll pay, because you'll be afraid. You'll always be afraid, because you never stood up when you had the chance. A Corvallian delegate stood. And what is the alternative? Die fighting a battle we cannot win? Danny smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Who says you can't win? The room stirred with uneasy murmurs. My team has fought the Vreknar before. We know how they think, we know how they fail, and we've spent the last 3 weeks studying this station's defenses. He paused. Give us command of the defense operation. Let us fight for you. We can win this. Against 40 warships? The Corvallian demanded. With a handful of humans and a merchant station? That's right. The delegate sat down heavily. That's madness. Maybe, Danny agreed. But you hired us knowing we were mad. The question is whether you trust us enough to let us do what we do best. Silence stretched through the great hall. Then Yalara stepped forward. She had been watching from the back of the room, wearing her first mate uniform, and carrying herself with dignity she had not possessed a month ago. I have seen these humans fight, she said. Her voice was soft but steady. I have seen them do impossible things. I have seen them bleed and laugh and keep fighting when any other species would have given up. She looked at Danny, then at the assembled delegates. I trust them. My captain trusts them. If we are going to die anyway, I would rather die fighting beside humans than live on my knees before the Vreknar. One by one, other voices joined hers. The Felisari crew of the Starlight Wanderer, merchants who had watched the humans work, even the Talari delegate, who had been treated by Megan just days before. But in the end, the council agreed. Danny nodded once. Good. Then let's get to work. We don't have much time. Outside the station, the Vreknar fleet continued its slow approach. Warlord Krathvex sat on his command throne, confident in his victory. He had no idea what was coming. Nexus Station 7 transformed in 3 days. Under Danny's direction, crews worked around the clock. Tommy led teams of engineers through the station's defensive systems, upgrading and modifying everything he touched. Katie coordinated supply lines and evacuation routes, making sure every civilian knew exactly where to go when the fighting started. Megan established triage centers in 6 locations across the station. Chris trained volunteer fighters from every species, teaching them basic combat tactics and how to survive when everything fell apart. The station's residents had never worked together before. Corvallians and Felisari, Talari, and a dozen other species, all setting aside their differences to prepare for war. It was messy and chaotic, and sometimes someone started crying in the middle of a corridor. But it was also something beautiful. Yalara found herself commanding a section of the defense grid. 2 weeks ago, she would have been terrified by the responsibility. Now, she simply did the work. The humans had changed her. She did not fully understand how, but she could feel the difference in her bones. On the morning of the 4th day, the Vreknar fleet arrived at the edge of the station's weapons range. 40 warships, bristling with weapons, arranged in perfect attack formation. Warlord Krathvex broadcast his demands to the station. People of Nexus Station 7, I am Warlord Krathvex of the Vreknar Empire. You are harboring dangerous criminals who have attacked my people and murdered my warriors. Surrender these humans within 1 hour, or your station will be destroyed. Every man, woman, and child will die. This is not a negotiation. His image filled every screen on the station. Gray skin, ritual scars, eyes that had watched countless victims beg for mercy. Danny stood in the command center, watching the broadcast. When it ended, he turned to the communication officer. "Open a channel. Let me respond." The channel opened. Danny's face appeared on every Vreknar bridge. "Warlord Krathvex, my name is Danny Lopez. I'm one of the humans you're looking for. I killed your fleet commander. I killed 14 of your warriors on his own ship. And now you've brought 40 warships because you're afraid that if you don't, everyone in the galaxy will know that humans can beat you." He leaned closer to the camera. "You're right to be afraid, but bringing more ships won't help. It will just give us more things to destroy. You want to fight? Come and get it. We'll be waiting." The channel closed. On his command deck, Krathvex roared with fury. "All ships, attack formation. Destroy that station. Leave nothing alive." The battle began. The Vreknar expected a standard assault. They would overwhelm the station's defenses with superior firepower, breach the hull in a dozen locations, and send boarding parties to slaughter anyone still alive. They had done this 100 times before. This time was different. The station's weapon systems came online with devastating effect. Tony's modifications had tripled their power output. Beams of energy sliced through Vreknar's shields, crippling ships that should have been invulnerable. The first wave of the attack faltered before it even reached the station. But the Vreknar were not easily discouraged. They adapted, spreading out their formation, forcing the station to divide its fire. Boarding torpedoes launched from 30 ships at once. Katie had anticipated this. She had mapped every possible breach point on the station and assigned defenders to each one. When the Vreknar warriors came through the breached hulls, they found kill zones waiting for them. Chris led the heaviest fighting in Sector 7. The Vreknar had sent their best warriors, elite killers trained since childhood for war. Chris and his team of volunteer fighters cut them down. The volunteers were not professional soldiers. They were shopkeepers and mechanics and teachers who had never held a weapon before last week. But Chris had taught them well, and more importantly, he fought alongside them. When they saw the massive human standing against the Vreknar tide, laughing as he took hits that would kill any other species, they found courage they did not know they had. Megan moved between triage centers, treating wounded from every species. A Corvallian merchant with a shattered arm. A Felisari child who had been too close to an explosion. A human volunteer with burns across half his body. She saved them all, her hands never stopping, her voice always calm. Yalara commanded her section of the defense grid with growing confidence. She targeted incoming missiles, coordinated fire with other sections, and refused to panic even when a direct hit knocked out half her systems. She simply switched to backup systems and kept fighting. But the true turning point came in space. Danny had prepared something special. During the 3 days of preparation, he had secretly converted the station's mining drones into weapons platforms. They were small and fragile, easily destroyed by serious firepower, but there were hundreds of them, and they were hidden among the asteroid debris surrounding the station. When the Vreknar fleet focused on the station's main defenses, the drones attacked their supply ships, fuel tankers, ammunition transports, medical vessels. The support fleet that kept the warships fighting. Suddenly, Krathvex found himself with a problem. His warriors were dying faster than expected. His ships were taking damage that could not be repaired, and his supply lines were being cut by enemies he could barely see. He should have retreated. Any sensible commander would have retreated. But Krathvex was not sensible. He was proud and angry, and he had promised to destroy the station. He would not leave until the job was done. All ships, focus fire on the station's command section. I want it destroyed now. The Vreknar fleet concentrated its attack. The station's shields buckled under the assault. Warning alarms screamed through every corridor. Danny watched the tactical display and smiled. Now, he said quietly. A single ship, hidden behind the station since the battle began, launched toward the Vreknar flagship. It was the shuttle Danny and Tony had used in the first battle, modified even further, armed with weapons that should not have fit on such a small vessel. By the time the Vreknar detected it, the shuttle had already pierced their defensive perimeter. Danny and Tony boarded the flagship for the second time, but this time they were not alone. Katie and Chris had joined them, leaving the station's ground defense in the hands of the volunteers. 4 humans against a warship. The battle inside the flagship was brutal and short. The Vreknar knew they were coming this time. They had guards at every junction, warriors at every door. It did not matter. The humans moved through the ship like fire through dry grass. They did not stop. They did not slow down. They did not hesitate. Danny found Kraftvex on the command deck, surrounded by his personal guard. The warlord was larger than any Vreknar Danny had ever seen, his body covered in scars earned through decades of murder and conquest. So, Kraftvex said, drawing his ceremonial blade, "The human comes to me at last. I will enjoy killing you slowly." "You talk too much," Danny replied. The fight lasted less than a minute. Kraftvex was strong and skilled, but he had spent too many years sending others to die for him. He had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy who would not break. When it was over, Danny stood over the warlord's body and activated the ship's communication system. "Vreknar fleet, your warlord is dead. Your supplies are destroyed. Your boarding parties have failed. You can continue fighting and die here, or you can leave and tell your people what happened. The choice is yours, but if any of you ever threaten Nexus Station again, we will find you. We will board your ships, and we will end you. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. This is your only warning." One by one, the Vreknar ships withdrew. They did not simply retreat from the station. They retreated from the entire sector. Word would spread of what had happened here, and the Vreknar would think twice before challenging human-protected territory again. Nexus Station 7 had survived. The celebration that followed lasted for 3 days. But the real celebration, Yallara thought, was quieter. It was in the way different species looked at each other now, without the old suspicions and fears. It was in the Corvallian merchant sharing a drink with a Felisari engineer. It was in the children playing together, making up games that combined traditions from a dozen worlds. 6 months later, Danny's security company had grown into something larger. Humans arrived at Nexus Station in growing numbers, finding a community that welcomed them. They worked as guards and engineers and doctors and teachers. They integrated with the station's population in ways that surprised everyone. Yallara had become their official liaison. She understood humans now, or at least she understood them as well as anyone could. She had learned their jokes and their customs and their strange habit of forming deep bonds through shared hardship. One evening, she found Zixthron and Drevik watching the stars from the observation deck. The Kepler corridor stretched out before them, safe now, a highway of commerce instead of a graveyard. "You actually hired humans," Drevik said slowly, the same words he had spoken months ago. "I did," Zixthron agreed. "I called it madness." "You did." Drevik was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he began to laugh. "I was right, you know. It was madness. Absolute, complete madness." Zixthron smiled. "And yet here we are." "Here we are," Drevik agreed. "Alive, prosperous. Protected by the most insane species the galaxy has ever produced. Behind them, the station hummed with life. Somewhere in the lower levels, Chris was teaching children how to play basketball, using a basket he had welded together from spare parts. Tony was annoying the engineering staff with his latest improvement project. Megan was treating a line of patients that stretched around the corner. Katie was organizing something, because Katie was always organizing something. And Danny was watching, planning, preparing for the next challenge. Because there would always be another challenge. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and full of threats, but Nexus Station 7 had something most places did not. It had humans. And that, Ylara reflected, made all the difference. An old Felisari elder approached her as she walked through the station's central plaza. He had been on the station for 50 years, through raids and recessions and countless hardships. "First Mate Ylara," he said, his voice thin with age. "My grandchildren keep asking me about the Battle of Nexus Station. They want to know about the humans." Ylara smiled. "What do you tell them?" The elder considered the question carefully. "I tell them that once, when all seemed lost, a few strange creatures from a distant world came to help us. They were violent and unpredictable, and they laughed in the face of death. They were absolutely mad." He paused. "And they were exactly what we needed." Ylara nodded slowly. "That," she said, "is exactly right." She walked on through the station, past beings of every species going about their lives in peace. The stars glowed softly through the observation windows. Somewhere ahead, new challenges waited. But for now, everything was exactly as it should be. The madness had saved them all.